Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on, and talk about some books. As you'll see from my title down below, we are finally quite late getting around to my monthly reading wrap up for the month of May. It is late because I have been moving at the moment. It has been a mad show. I am sure I'll tell you about it in some vlogs. I'll link the vlog where I talk about it more up above and down below if you really want the lowdown on everything that's been going on. It's been nuts, but I don't want to dilly-dally or dawdle for this video. I just want to get straight into it for you guys and go through the books that I read in May and my favorite book, my least favorite book. But first we are going to start with some key stats. So the books that I read in May were Educated by Tara Westover, In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, Fable by Adrienne Young, The Guest List by Lucy Foley, A Quiet Life in the Country by T.E. Kinsey, A Perilous Undertaking by Deanna Raybourn, Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey, Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco, After by Anna Todd, and finally The Diviners by Libba Bray. That is a total of 11 books read, 2 of which were DNFs and 1 of them was a reread. For my star ratings, I had 1 5-star, 1 4-star, 4 3-stars, 2 2-stars, and 3 1-stars. And those 3 1-stars do count my DNFs because I don't have like a separate DNF option in this sort of spreadsheet that I put together, so that counts as those. The primary genre that I read was mystery, where I read 4 books, as well as fantasy, where I also read 4 books. Then we had 2 romance and 1 nonfiction. Now we go to one of my favorite stats, which is the diversity stat, because this is something that I'm really trying to like reach certain goals for. I'm trying to read more books with more broader diversity. So 36.4% of the books that I read had people of color in leading roles. 36.4% had key characters who were in the LGBT community. 36.4% of the books I read also had mental health rep. Then 27.3% of the books I read had religion or spirituality as key themes. 9.1% of the books I read had body positivity as a key theme. For the format of the books that I read, 54.5% of them were paperback. Then we had 27.3% which were hardback, and then 9.1% each for ebook and audiobook. In terms of smashing out my series goal, 36.4% of the books that I read were part of a series, 45.5% of the books that I read were standalone, and then we had 9.1% each for trilogy and duology. My author diversity is unfortunately still really lacking at the moment. I had 90.9% of the books that I read written by female authors, and only one of the books that I read, aka 9.1%, was written by a male author. And then in terms of the country that a lot of these authors originated from, 8 of the books I read were from US authors, 2 books that I read were from English authors, and 1 book was from an Australian author. So those were my key stats. I'll see if I can find a way to link my stats spreadsheet down below so that you guys can check that out if it interests you, if you want to use it yourself as a way to fill out your own stats. But now I'm going to jump into the worst book that I read in May, which I think if you watch my May smashing out some book club reads reading vlog, which I'll link up above and down below, you already know what this book is going to be, and that is In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens, which was one of my DNFs. This was probably one of the earliest DNFs I've ever done in the history of my reading, in the history of this channel, just in the history of me, and I DNF'd this book at 38 pages, which is just nuts to me. The flip side to that is that I don't remember at all what this book was about, so I'm going to read you the Goodreads profile, which you can't see on my screen, but I promise you it's up, and it says, a young prince must rely on a mysterious stranger to save him when he is kidnapped during his coming-of-age tour in this swoony adventure that is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue meets Pirates of the Caribbean. I think that's ambitious because I love Pirates of the Caribbean, and this is not as good as that. Prince Tal has long awaited his coming-of-age tour. After spending most of his life cloistered behind palace walls as he learns to keep his forbidden magic secret, he can finally see his family's kingdom for the first time. His first taste of adventure comes just 2 days into the journey when their crew discovers a mysterious prisoner on a burning derelict vessel. Tasked with watching over the prisoner, Tal is surprised to feel an intense connection with the roguish Athlin. So when Athlin leaps overboard and disappears, Tal feels responsible and heartbroken, knowing Athlin could not have survived in the open ocean. That is until Tal runs into Athlin days later on dry land, very much alive and as charming and secretive as ever. But before they can pursue anything further, Tal is kidnapped by pirates and held ransom in a plot to reveal his rumored powers and instigate a war. Tal must escape if he hopes to save his family and the kingdom, and Athlin might just be his only hope. Now, fun little fact about this book, everything that I just read to you, or almost everything minus the last 2 sentences, happens in the first 38 pages of this book. So you go into the rest of this book going, I have no idea where this is going to go, and then it also tells you that the plot is moving incredibly quickly, which means that there is definitely some lacking in terms of character building, relationship building, world building, magic building, everything like that. The context context for this story is just not provided because the plot is racing so fast that you just cannot keep up. In terms of the writing style of this book, it felt kind of immature to me. It was a lot of he said this and then I said that and then he did that and then I did this. It was all tell. The author didn't let you imagine anything yourself. You weren't shown anything, like you weren't sort of given the opportunity to imagine things yourself. It was all very blatantly told to you, matter of fact, how it was. And it meant that you couldn't let your own imagination run wild. In terms of world building, there were frequent mentions of these other kingdoms that were surrounding this kingdom and there were conflicts between them, but then it never really went into detail on what those conflicts were, who those kingdoms were, who they were led by, what the history of those kingdoms were. There was just no context provided into the broader world. There was also mentions of Tal's magic, but then you never really understood the parameters of the magic. And maybe that's something that came later on in the novel, but it kept being brought up as this something that, you know, needs to be hidden, but then it doesn't really tell you what he can actually do. You get brief hints at it, but nothing in detail. And lastly, this book was very insta-love. I think Tal spent maybe an hour or two with Athlin and was already absolutely devoted to him. And I just couldn't deal with that. So it was at that point that I was like, no, I am dropping this book. 38 pages in, I cannot read a single other word. But luckily, the very next book that I read was my 5-star read for this month. It is my favorite book of the month. I have talked about it before. I will link up above and down below the video where I've talked about it previously, the 5-book reading update where I talked about it, because it is amazing and I think everybody should read it. And that is Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. Last Night at the Telegraph Club follows Lily Hu, who is a Chinese American living in the 1950s, 1960s, I think, which is basically in the US when red paranoia was the thing. The US was incredibly scared of communism, and so Chinese Americans and anyone with any links to communism or suspected links to communism were persecuted, and so Lily is just growing up in this very unstable environment. She's also beginning to realize she has feelings for a girl in her class by the name of Kath. So again, a very complex situation for Lily to be in, given the attitude towards the LGBT community at the time. Through her relationship with Kath, Lily attends the Telegraph Club, which is a sort of famous lesbian bar near where she lives, and she gets to know a lot of other people in the community and gets to experience some of their troubles and everything they go through on a day-to-day basis, as well as police raids and the family reactions and attitudes to her coming out as a lesbian woman at a time when this family is just trying to stay so under the radar. As you can tell, I love this book so much. It also has the second timeline where you get to know a bit more about Lily's family and why they have the attitudes that they have towards her and towards the US in general, because they've done everything they can to come to this country. They fought so hard for their citizenship, but they are put, this whole citizenship is put on the line by everything Lily's doing and just the fact that they are Chinese Americans during a time when the US is terrified of communism. From the very first page, I fell in love with this book because it sets the scene so perfectly. It has this timeline on the very first page, and it's a timeline that's sort of repeated throughout the book in different sections, and it basically outlines all the sort of historical events happening at the time and then all the sort of more personal events happening in Lily's family at the time. So it not only positions the book really well, giving you the context and the environment and the attitudes, but it also really tells you that Lily's history and the American history that she's dealing with are really integrated. Like, the history that is happening in the US is part of Lily's story. From those very first moments of attraction with Kath through to the Telegraph Club and all the relationships she built there, it was just this perfect coming of age, sexual awakening story, and it was so sweet and lovely, and it's just heart fluttering and soul warming, and I have not got enough words to say how much I love this book. I think everybody should read it. It is incredibly important, I think, in terms of historical context, and then also just a lovely romance, lovely coming of age story. So that is my May reading wrap up. Let me know down below if you liked this video, if you have read any of the books that I've read, loved them, hated them, what you read in May. I always love to chat to you guys down below, and I do my best to reply to every single comment. As always, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified when I release new content. It is a really easy way to help your girl out and help my channel grow, and I will see you lovely people in my next video. Bye!